The financial system is already changing, and most people have no idea. While everyone's distracted by meme coins and politics, the G20 just made a move that will change everything, and XRP and XLM are at the heart of it. This isn't a rumor. This is now official. The G20 Central Bank Digital Currency, CBDC, framework is live, and it's not just theory anymore. Ripple and Stellar aren't just players. They're already inside the infrastructure. If you hold XRP or XLM, you need to understand what this means. Because by the time the public realizes what just happened, it will already be too late. Hit that subscribe button for Be Crypto Smart so you don't miss the institutional crypto moves they don't want retail to see. The G20 CBDC framework goes live. What it actually means. Let's break this down. The G20, which includes the world's largest economies, just confirmed the official rollout of their cross-border CBDC interoperability framework. This isn't some vague commitment or roadmap. It's an active system fully endorsed by the BIS Innovation Hub, the IMF, and the Financial Stability Board, the same global institutions that shaped the post-2008 financial order. This framework is the digital backbone for the next phase of global finance. It establishes how national digital currencies, CBDCs, can interact, exchange value, and communicate across borders. In short, it solves the biggest problem CBDCs have had since day one. Siloed ecosystems with no bridge between them. And that bridge? It's no longer a concept. It's no longer under review. It's live. Ripple and Stellar are not just integrated. They've been positioned as core settlement layers inside the very architecture of this framework. The G20 framework isn't just technical, it's geopolitical. It formalizes how digital money will flow between China, the EU, the US, Brazil, India, and dozens of emerging economies. It lays the legal, compliance, and interoperability groundwork for the tokenization of currencies, securities, and real-world assets. This system includes unified standards for regulatory reporting, embedded AML/KYC mechanisms across jurisdictions, real-time messaging and instant settlement across blockchains, ISO 20022 compliant communication protocols. If that last point sounds familiar, it should. ISO 20022 is the same messaging standard used by RippleNet and Stellar's network. Projects like mBridge are no longer experiments. They've moved into production with live participation from the People's Bank of China, Hong Kong Monetary Authority, Bank of Thailand, and the UAE Central Bank. Their goal? Cross-border CBDC exchange using a shared ledger. That's not futuristic, that's XRP and XLM territory. Similarly, the Icebreaker project by the BIS, which tested CBDC interactions between Sweden, Norway, and Israel, demonstrated the exact kind of hub-and-spoke model that Ripple and Stellar have been building for years. Let's not forget, Ripple's CBDC private ledger was built specifically for this moment. And Stellar's smart asset issuance is tailor-made for programmable money and stablecoin-backed CBDCs. So when we say the G20 framework is live, we're talking about a fully mapped-out global system where XRP and XLM are no longer speculative plays, they're infrastructure. The testing is done. The rails are laid. The compliance boxes are checked. The only thing missing? Retail understanding. Because here's how it works. First, the infrastructure goes live. Then the governments plug in. Then the banks. Then the corporations. And only at the very end comes the public. And by then, XRP and XLM will already be embedded inside the world's financial plumbing. And if you're holding XRP or XLM, you're holding a position in the foundation of that new global settlement layer. XRP and XLM integration, hidden in plain sight. If you've been watching closely, you've already seen the clues. Ripple has been directly involved in over 20 CBDC pilots, including with Bhutan, Palau, Montenegro, and Colombia. Their CBDC private ledger, powered by XRP, is specifically designed for central banks to mint, manage, and settle CBDCs on a scalable and compliant system. But this isn't just about experimentation anymore. The architecture behind Ripple's CBDC solution is now being actively referenced in policy frameworks. In fact, the Bank for International Settlements has highlighted the benefits of tokenized interoperability, something Ripple's XRP ledger and its private version have been quietly optimizing for years. Meanwhile, Stellar is executing a different, but equally powerful strategy. Through partnerships with MoneyGram, Circle, and even UNHCR, Stellar is operating in real-world humanitarian corridors and cash disbursement channels. The Stellar Aid Assist program is already being used to deliver blockchain-based aid to refugees in Ukraine and Latin America. That's not future speculation. That's on-chain deployment in crisis zones right now. And behind the scenes, Stellar has been contributing to the Digital Dollar Project, helping shape how the U.S. government could roll out a compliant, tokenized form of cash. It's the quiet diplomacy of infrastructure. Build early, plug in silently, and wait for the world to catch up. But here's what most people miss. Ripple and Stellar aren't just building isolated products. They're building bridges to the global CBDC system. They've been preparing for interoperability at scale. And now that plan is being executed. The Bank for International Settlements, in its latest publications, mentioned the necessity for systems that can translate between differing protocols and messaging standards. ISO 20022 was explicitly referenced, and that's exactly what RippleNet and the Stellar protocol already use. What does that mean in plain terms? Ripple and Stellar already speak the global financial language. Their systems are already ISO 20022 compliant. They've both demonstrated regulatory alignment in multiple countries. And now that the G20 framework is online, the systems they built are pre-approved infrastructure. It's like watching two quiet architects plug their blueprints into a live city grid. While everyone else is still sketching ideas on paper, Ripple and Stellar have working subways under the streets. Translation: they've already been integrated quietly, and now that the framework is live, their systems are ready to go. This isn't a maybe. This isn't in development. This is switch-on season, and XRP and XLM are sitting on the launch pads. Let's talk institutions. The IMF, BIS, World Bank, and Financial Stability Board have been building toward this since 2020. Their early documents talked about policy alignment, regulatory harmonization, and multilateral settlement layers. At the time, most ignored it. But now, in 2025, that framework isn't just aligned, it's being deployed. In the last 12 months, we've seen something shift. The G20 institutions stopped theorizing and started executing. You don't bring together the world's biggest economies, finalize global messaging standards, and greenlight CBDC corridors unless deployment is imminent. Ripple has been strategically embedded in this rollout for years. They are official members of the Digital Pound Foundation, Digital Euro Association, and Hedera's Governing Council, GBA. They've presented to European Parliament committees, worked with Japan's FSA, and even lobbied behind closed doors with the U.S. Federal Reserve. They also joined the Faster Payments Council in the U.S. and have partnered with banks like Santander, Standard Chartered, and Bank of America. RippleNet is no longer a startup experiment. It's becoming an institutional bridge. On the Stellar side, it's equally strategic but quieter. Stellar has a deep alliance with IBM, powering global payments through the now-revived World Wire initiative. It also works with MoneyGram for on/off-ramp infrastructure in over 180 countries. But that's not all. The UNHCR, International Rescue Committee, and Mercy Corps have all used Stellar for blockchain-based humanitarian aid disbursement. That means Stellar isn't just solving payment rails. It's solving real-world distribution and identity-backed value flows. These aren't buzzword partnerships. These are global institutions running real funds through real corridors, and in many cases using XLM as the underlying rail. Now bring in the big infrastructure pilots. Project Dunbar, Enbridge, and Icebreaker, all spearheaded by the Bank for International Settlements. These projects involve central banks from China, the UAE, Sweden, Thailand, and more. All of them focus on cross-border interoperability of CBDCs. What do they all have in common? Every pilot was built on interoperability protocols. Every pilot used ISO 20022 compatible messaging. Every pilot concluded that a shared settlement layer was essential. And which digital assets are built from day one to solve that? XRP and XLM. These aren't speculative partnerships. These are systemic integrations. Ripple and Stellar are not hoping to be adopted. They are already entrenched. They're not lobbying for use cases. The use cases already exist, are functioning, and are expanding across jurisdictions. What's happening right now is the biggest coordinated rollout of financial plumbing since Swift, and this time it's programmable, borderless, and blockchain-powered. And the rails that are being plugged in? Ripple and Stellar helped lay them. XRP and XLM aren't waiting for adoption. They've already been selected by the institutions building the new system. Why this is a massive signal for holders? Here's the thing. Most people won't feel the effects of this rollout immediately. But that's the point. This isn't about headlines. This isn't about hype. This is how institutions move quietly, methodically, and with irreversible intent. Infrastructure doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It just replaces the old system silently. By the time the average person realizes the switch has been flipped, value is already flowing through new channels. And those channels? They're being built on XRP and XLM. Let that sink in. We're not waiting for utility. It's already here. The G20 didn't just approve a policy. They launched the rails that central banks, commercial banks, and cross-border platforms will use to settle value in a post-Swift world. When you see ISO 20022 live, when you see central banks actively building bridges, when you see Ripple and Stellar already servicing real CBDC pilots, that's not a future use case. That's the foundation of the next financial era already in motion. If you're holding XRP and XLM, understand what you're really holding. You're not holding a gamble, you're holding pre-integrated liquidity rails. You're not betting on hype, you're aligned with institutional-grade settlement systems. You're not early to the tech, you're early to the deployment of the tech. This is why institutions don't chase hype cycles. They chase interoperability, compliance, and proven scalability. And both Ripple and Stellar check every one of those boxes. The G20 CBDC framework just confirmed the game plan. And unlike previous cycles driven by speculation, this one is driven by global monetary policy alignment. The big money is already moving, not in public yet, but behind the scenes. And the moment that flow goes on-chain at scale, the assets baked into that system will reprice fast and violently. So if you're holding XRP and XLM and wondering why price hasn't moved, now you know. You're not holding hype, you're holding the backbone of a global liquidity grid that hasn't been turned fully on yet. But when it is, you'll be on the right side of the digital value reset. This is your signal. The system just blinked green. What happens next? XRP, XLM, and the new financial system. So what comes next? Here's the real trajectory. Expect more central banks to shift from pilots to full-scale public CBDC rollouts. We're already seeing announcements stacking up, from India to the EU to Latin America. And behind each of these deployments are the same infrastructure conversations. How do we connect across borders? How do we settle in real time? And what rails can handle compliance at scale? Answer: the ones already integrated, Ripple and Stellar. Expect Ripple to announce more government and institutional deals. Not on Twitter, but through formal publications, conference briefings, and quiet integrations. This is how enterprise adoption always rolls out. Not with hype, but with strategic silence until deployment is complete. Expect Stellar to continue scaling its real-world utility across corridors retail investors don't even see. Humanitarian aid, emerging market banking, tokenized assets for the unbanked. These are not speculative trends. They're core use cases for the global financial reset. And most importantly, expect the price to lag behind the deployment until utility volume flips the switch. Because utility-based assets don't move like hype coins. They don't spike on speculation. They surge when the infrastructure goes live and liquidity demand forces repricing. So don't mistake the quiet for inaction. The silence is the signal. Right now, corridors are opening. Banks are plugging in. Protocols are locking into live systems. And every piece of this puzzle points to the same conclusion. The XRP ledger and the Stellar network are no longer trying to become infrastructure. They are infrastructure. And based on what we're seeing now, the switch isn't being flipped. It's already been flipped. Don't sleep on this moment. If you're still here, you're early. But not for long. The G20 just confirmed the plan. The rails are live. The assets are integrated. XRP and XLM are no longer speculative plays. They're infrastructure. This isn't about watching charts. It's about watching systems. And the system just went live. Subscribe to Be Crypto Smart and turn on notifications, because you're not just watching the future of money. You're already in it.